All right, weight loss revolution. I called it revolution because as I was going through the material, so I was, wow, that is something that I had no idea. Some of the stuff, luckily not too much, totally negated what I was saying before. And as you know, we're very, very science-based in this office. We have been this whole time. If you look at each slide, you'll see on the bottom the references of the journal articles where it comes from. So if you ever want to dig more into it, say, how did you come up with that one? Just go to that journal article, go to pubmed.org. PubMed.org is a compilation of all these thousands of medical journals, all peer-reviewed, top tier, and that's where a lot of this information comes from. Obesity. I like to propose something. Obesity is a normal response to a highly abnormal environment. The body is simply doing what it's programmed to do. This is not a disease like they claim. They claim it's a disease because that fuels the pharmaceutical companies. Plain and simple. You got a disease, you've got a diagnosis code, now it's billable, and therefore you can use this drug. Right? And we've seen these drugs come and go, haven't we? It's been amazing. Each one of them has side effects that's way beyond the norm. And honestly, the amount of side effects compared to how much weight you lose, it's truly a pathetic thing. They don't work. So when I started studying really the obesity curve, things really started going south in the 1970s. So a lot of the food industry, which is just an immense, huge colossus, it's a big part of our economy, right, has always tried to deflect blame. It's really interesting to watch all the articles. First it was, I couldn't believe it, when I remember this about 25 years ago in Congress. They were sitting in Congress at a testimony on the obesity epidemic, and this food rep was trying to argue that a calorie from Coca-Cola is the same as a calorie from broccoli. A calorie is a calorie. Well, you just know intuitively that's not true, right? I mean, there's just no way. One is an obesogen and the other one actually makes you lose weight. One feeds you, the other one destroys you. So what happened? One thing is they started blaming lack of exercise. Oh, you guys are lazy. That's where the obesity epidemic primarily is coming from. It is totally false. It is totally false. Why? If you study levels of activity, it started declining rapidly right around the 1920s. So, right, the washing machine was invented and on, everything became automated. And by the 1930s, a lot of comforts were in place, right? The car became more commonplace and people started not moving nearly as much. People moved from the farm to the cities, and there is absolutely no change in weight with that decrease in activity. I would like to propose that yes, exercise is important. It has many health benefits, and I'm going to talk about that, and it is part of the program, but it has a very small impact on weight loss. The evidence just isn't there. We should be exercising for many other reasons, and again, I'm going to go into that. But in the early 1970s, we started figuring out that we can get people addicted to foods. Most large companies hired behavioral specialists to figure out exactly. I'd be happy to say it again. So most companies had hired these behavioral specialists to figure out how can we get people to eat more, and on top of that, preservatives were invented, and on top of that, convenient packaging was invented. So we went from the kitchen in the 1960s where all food was prepared to now being able to buy it on the shelves, and not only that, you could keep it forever. I don't know if you saw the headline today, but this hamburger from McDonald's, $19.99, they unpacked it. It looks identical. Nothing has happened to it. That's how far we've traveled away from food. This, folks, is not food. It's a chemical experiment. They say all that was wrong with this thing was that it smelled a little bit like cardboard. Yeah? So the food industry has created stuff that really should not be called food. And it is convenient and it's cheap, but it's not cheap because in the long run, it's costing us a lot of money, isn't it? It's costing us a lot of money. I had a conversation with one of my teenage patients today. I said, yeah, doc, it's just so, I can get a hamburger for $1. I had no idea it was that cheap. And yeah, but the broccoli I had for breakfast mixed with cauliflower and walnuts, which I could conveniently buy at Trader Joe's, right? Just all mixed together. It had some sort of vinegar sauce with it. It was amazing, right? Just stir-fried. Cost me maybe $2. Yeah, so it can be done inexpensively. Eating, sometimes we get this argument that, well, it's so much more expensive to eat well. Go through the produce aisle. It is not expensive. I like to propose that to you. Meat is expensive, but produce generally is not. So it's become a multi-trillion-dollar industry. Not million, billion, trillion. Okay? The power in Washington of these companies is unbelievable. It's gotten to the point when nutritional gatherings are being done. They are funded by Coca-Cola and all these companies that are not known for nutrition. Why? That if they have to become critical for Coca-Cola, they will at least soften their voice a little bit because this is where their money comes from. I'm getting handouts from the hospitals here for, say, diabetes counseling. It's all funded by these big food companies. The one that makes the artificial sweeteners. Yeah, I mean, it's gotten so out of hand. So we really, excuse me, I'm not getting emotional. As we become more and more ill from all the calories, more and more energy is required to sift through the constant bombarding of misinformation, advertising, and addictive foods. It's the Wild West out there, folks, and therefore this presentation. Okay. The cost. I already talked about this a little bit. Social stigmatization, right? There is so much bias against being overweight and obesity. It is unreal. And it's something that becomes a mental scar, an emotional scar rather. And I feel that the stress of that alone is also driving obesity. Because we know when the adrenals get stressed chronically, metabolism slows and it becomes an inflammatory condition. And the emperor of all maladies really is inflammation. It fuels every single disease. Might not cause it, but it will fuel it for sure. So I like to call inflammation the emperor of all maladies. That's inflammation. There's a simple marker that I'll repeat again a little later that you can measure that kind of inflammation. It's called high sensitivity C-reactive protein. Cheap one to run, very accurate. You want to be less than 1 on that one, folks. If you're over 1, you are fueling autoimmune disease, your arthritis, joint degeneration, Alzheimer's, all those things. So yes, obesity is associated with all those diseases. You can go A through Z, every disease known, and obesity will fuel it. So to continue this cost thing, dietary supplements cause 50,000 adverse effects annually, okay, especially liver and kidney damage. And 70% of supplement manufacturers that are preying on you violated good manufacturing practices. That's the very bare minimum standard, okay? It can't contain things that are bad for you, and it's got to have what's on the label inside within 10%. So you don't have to have clinical trials, it's just super minimum. 70% of the manufacturers flunked that. Okay? And a big part of the supplement industry is weight loss. You know that, right? Just like all the cookbooks and all that, it's an amazing thing. 68% of supplements tested had key ingredients on the label missing completely, usually replaced by just plant parts. Okay? So it's not even, there's nothing in there. So I got that from the National Products Insider and several journal articles that we did that. Now, on the flip side, it's also known that the number 3 or 4 cause of death is medications. Okay, I like to also flip that. At least we don't have that part in this industry. But medications cause between 150 and 250,000 deaths a year. So it's It's a bit of a sordid tale out there, folks. Okay, this is an interesting one that was published in the Journal of Diet Association, and some researchers in Denver just thought, we're just going to buy every single supplement that's associated with weight loss within 10-mile radius, and 35% of them were adulterated with banned ingredients. I saw a smaller study in New York City, and it was worse than that. And these banned ingredients are usually medications made in China and designed to do very funny things to you, one of which is not good health. So let's not put our eggs in this basket. How about the commercial programs? I had to do a little digging on this one. I found it in JAMA, Journal of American Medical Association. And Jenny Craig, after 1 year, only 7% were still active. Of that 7%, by the way, they had lost an average of 3.5 pounds. Okay? Same thing with Weight Watchers. Average weight loss of only 3% after 2 years, and that's with weekly meetings, immense cost, a lot of energy. It's really kind of not hitting the mark. So we'll leave that sordid tale behind us and go to inflammation. I chose inflammation as one of the first clinical topic here because, again, it is the emperor of all maladies and it is a big part of the obesity epidemic. Okay? Again, high sensitivity C-reactive protein is how you can measure it. And I found this very interesting article from the National Institute of Health in 2018 that found that we now know why obesity causes inflammation. First of all, one thing, if you go over 30% fat, all of a sudden, fat changes nature. It goes into a different color, and it becomes this full-time inflammatory suit. Full-time, 24/7. Okay? This is what you're battling against. Constant inflammation. We knew this to be true observationally, but we never knew why. Now we do. So somebody got the brilliant idea to check oxygen levels in belly fat. At this depth, at this depth, at this depth. Glad I wasn't one of those volunteers. And found that as soon as you go an inch down, oxygen levels went down to 60 to 70%. Below 90%, you already get dysfunction, right? That's why you go on oxygen when you measure below 90%. So this is very low oxygen levels. And what happens, it's not enough to maintain these fat cells, and they start dying. The body senses that, and they go, uh-oh, got to clean up. Macrophages swarm to the area, just like a site of infection, really, and create cysts, which then spew out inflammatory molecules all the time. So this inflammation hits you wherever you are genetically the weakest, right? We all have genes, and they're meant to be expressed a certain way. Give it a good stuff, nice music will happen. Give it bad stuff, and you get some hard rock that's really lousy. So we need to make sure that either we oxygenate fat well, and I don't know how to do that, or lose it. So largely due to pro-inflammatory food components such as super refined foods, environmental chemicals, and saturated fat and trans fat, which is cheesecake, cake, ice cream, chicken, pork, and burgers, those are the main things that cause inflammation. Environmental toxicity has added fuel to it. If it weren't for the environmental toxicity, we'd probably be in half the problem that we are today. But because we have so much environmental toxicity, our ability to detoxify is compromised, and now these super refined junk foods, our body can't handle it. It just cannot handle it. So it's amplifying the bad effects of the food. So on the other side of the coin also, because we live in a polluted environment, it really should be motivation to eat really well, doesn't it? We need to fuel our detoxification pathways. We need to get the fiber to get rid of toxins, right? We can't afford to eat badly. This is why overall longevity for the third year in a row now has been declining in the US. First time in recorded history except for war times. Our kids are expected to live a lot lot less lifespan than we are. And it's not only about lifespan, but to me, it's also about health span, right? You want to be able to do what you need to do. And I was just talking to a 92-year-old patient this morning, and she says, Doc, I'm just so grateful for being here. And she says, but I don't get it. A lot of my friends, one, they've either passed away or they've checked out. She says, I'm really, really trying to be there for my grandkids and great-grandkids and be an influence to them because I know it has an impact on them. And I said, oh yeah, good for you. And right, that's health span, not lifespan. Yeah. So fiber to the rescue. I do questions afterwards. So fiber is one of the key new components with the battle against obesity. I remember doing this seminar about 17, 18 years ago. And the new finding then, and this was a really cool finding and still is to this day, was a new concept called glycemic index and insulin resistance, right? Buzzword, everybody knows about it now, but it was brand new back then. And it really was, it was a revelation. So really, your body can become resistant to the action of insulin, right? And then insulin spikes whenever you eat even good food, and that directs all that food to go directly to fat instead of to muscle and brain, wherever you need it. That's insulin resistance, right? And all of a sudden we had a new tool to use. Well, we have another one today, and that is fiber. It's got to be the indigestible, must be fermentable to feed our microbiome. So not Metamucil, okay? It can't ferment. It's got to be able to ferment in the colon, and then what happens, the bacteria that act on fiber in the food releases something called short-chain fatty acids. It's something we also analyze when we do a stool analysis here to measure colonic health, intestinal health. And it's one of the more important things to measure because short-chain fatty acids acts like a hormone in the body. It spreads to the whole body, speaks directly to our brain, our neurotransmitters, so it is an antidepressant, antipsychotic, clears brain fog, and yes, fights Alzheimer's dramatically. Short-chain fatty acids also hits inflammatory receptors and turns off inflammatory immune cells, so autoimmune disease, right? Inflammation in general, and increases the hormone leptin, which equals less appetite and weight. Magic. So yes, it regulates appetite, metabolism, and body fat. So the thick and thin of it is that increasing consumption of dietary fiber with fruits, vegetables, whole grains, and legumes across the life cycle is a critical step in stemming the epidemic of obesity. Journal of Nutrients is where I found that one. Now, when you really look at it, in a Journal of Nutrition, they did a survey of US citizens. Only 3% of us get enough fiber every day. So then I had to go look, what is the minimum fiber required? And it is a pathetic 25 grams a day. And only 3% of us are getting that. It is a major nutritional deficiency, folks. The optimal, if you look at the world's most healthy people, they're found in what we call blue zones. You've probably heard of blue zones, right? Blue zones is the area where the longest and healthiest people live. Okinawa, and there's even one in the United States, by the way, on the West Coast. And they on average are between 80 and 110 grams a day. That's their average. And I really feel, when I was looking at that again, that is the one commonality among these longest people living on Earth, is their fiber intake is dramatic. And there's other things, community, and right, there's all kinds of factors. But fiber was very high on the list. Okay? We worry in the United States about protein, don't we? Oh, does it have enough protein? But right, I hear that nonstop. Doc, how much protein should I be getting? And really, don't worry about it. 90% and 7% of us get enough. So it should be flipped around. We should be talking about fiber. Fiber feeds the microbiome. Obviously, antibiotics destroys it. Microbiome is the good bacteria that live in your gut, right? It makes up the majority of life. Okay, we have way more bacteria in us than we have cells. And it's 80% of your immune system, 50% of your hormones, 93% of serotonin is actually affected by your microbiome. So it goes on and on. That's why we call this the second brain as well. And each course of antibiotics early in life, this is another one that kind of shocked me, increases obesity by 7%. So if your first 3 years of life, you've had one antibiotic, your chances of becoming obese is 7% higher, then 14% higher, 21% higher, right? The average kid in the United States has 3 antibiotics first year of life. By the time they're 20, they've had 20 rounds of antibiotics. That's the average. I think, opinion here, everything else is science, opinion here for a sec, I think we're reaching a post-antibiotic era. All of a sudden, I'm seeing people dying of infectious disease. And it's happening in only the last 2-3 years, folks. Pneumonia, that's not treatable. And I can go on and on. So I think we've reached the end run of antibiotics, and hopefully its use is going to start going down because we have to find other ways to do it. So I remember also as a teenager working the farm, and as we got the cows ready to go for slaughter, we would always start feeding them bags of antibiotics. Why? Because it would fatten them up really quickly. It was standard of care in farms back then. It still gets done to this day. It still gets done to this day, and that's what we eat. So just from the meat also, we were getting quite a shift in our microbiome. Okay. So our modern low-fiber diet, antibiotics, toxicity is key reason for microbiome depletion. I could talk about the microbiome and that's call it done. I would be covering 70% of the obesity talk. It is that important. But there's more interesting little tidbits. Yay. Is food timing important? Very much so. Journal of Physical Anthropology did a really good study on this. And what they did, they standardized a breakfast. Think a bowl of oatmeal, maybe made with coconut milk with some nuts on it, a little bit of cinnamon, cranberries, right? So something that's pretty yummy, pretty healthy. And they gave that standardized meal at 7 a.m. and then compared it to what happened in the body when they compared it to 1 p.m. Folks, there's a 37% blood sugar difference. So what we eat at lunch gives you a much greater sugar spike than what we eat at breakfast. Isn't that interesting? Therefore, we can actually stand a few more carbs at breakfast, can't we? If you really like some carbs, maybe breakfast is a better way to do it, to some degree. To some degree. Okay? So, but the dinner after 8 p.m., look at that. High blood sugar levels, the next breakfast. So if you eat late, no matter how good your breakfast is, you are going to get sugar dysregulation from that. And with sugar dysregulation, you get the insulin spike and it'll direct it just immediately to belly fat. It doesn't go to muscle, it doesn't go to brain, it goes there. So that's kind of a big one. So timing of your food is important. Now, practical purposes, I'm going to come home late tonight. I would like to have something to eat, yeah? But because I know it's later, it's going to be a much lighter meal than usual. Does that make sense? Just you can play with it. So, eating more calories in the morning compared to evening also included much greater weight loss, sugar control, and, interestingly, lowered cardiovascular disease. And we all know cardiovascular disease is not really a cholesterol issue. It's more of an inflammatory issue due to too much sugar. Okay, this has been known for decades, and they keep pounding this cholesterol thing, and I'm getting a little tired of it. Now, there's a few diets out there, isn't there? Books and books and books. When you really study them, I found precious little evidence on some of them. So, what we've done, we've unleashed our health coaches on our patient population. I found about, I don't know, Don, how long have we been doing health coaching? A very long time. We were probably the pioneers in Michigan. And, and I did that out of a little bit of frustration because I knew what the patient needed, but I didn't have the time to really teach it. So I said, it's easy. You just do this and this and this. And they walk out, they had no clue what I said, right? And so we employed health coaches here with great success. And come on over, Don. So Don and Jamie's not here right now, work at individualizing what you eat, how you live, lifestyle. And there was one that was a little controversial for us to do. It was the ketogenic one, huh? When we started working on that, it took us, what, half a year to get it right? Because we know ketogenic diets, originally a Dutch diet, by the way. It's from the Netherlands. It was for fighting seizures back in the 1920s. So we've known about this a long time. And it produces something called ketosis, which encourages fat burning. And what I really like, a mitochondrial reset, energy production reset. However, what's wrong with it the way we do it over here?
Very high in dairy, very high in pork, very low in that fiber that you were just talking about.
Yeah. So the patient essentially becomes toxic, don't they?
Very inflamed.
Very inflamed. And we've seen quite a few patients that have done the keto diet and they've jump-started an autoimmune disease. Yeah, I still remember the moment I walked into room 1, this is not that long ago, and she's sitting there. I did not recognize her because I had not seen her in a year. And she had lost 70 pounds of weight, but looked just awful, just gray. And she started listing the autoimmune diseases she had developed in the past year. And she didn't understand why. Yeah, so it's ketogenesis done wrong. So how do we do it right?
Right, so we've worked on getting in all of those healthy fats, right? Rather than the unhealthy ones. We've created some balance with a moderate amount of protein in there, and then really being very heavy in those nutrient-dense, non-starchy vegetables.
Yeah, fiber, right? So now we've got the best of both worlds. We've got an anti-inflammatory food plan, a partial detox, while still being ketogenic. And we get results very fast. Yeah. So when I was reviewing the literature on keto diets, it was all just bashing it. One, they didn't do it long enough. Number two, they said that all the weight loss is only from water weight and all that. And that is true the first few weeks. And most studies were only 3 weeks long. Okay, but when you do it right and you have the phytonutrients in it, you can get some very dramatic results. How about the fast mimicking diet? So that was another fun one that we embarked on. It took a long time.
It did.
And the fast mimicking diet, I have a 20-minute video on it on YouTube that you can download and look at. But that essentially, what does it do?
Yeah, it creates a really nice reset for the body. And when we get into that period of, it's a 5-day fast. And when we get into that period of 3 to 5 days of fasting, it really causes the body to have that cell regeneration, stem cell generation in there. And then when we begin that process of refeeding the body again, that's when this autophagy happens in the body. It's like the vacuum cleaners kind of coming in and cleaning up that debris. And there's a lot of really good research on that for autoimmune diseases, cancers, and so forth.
Yep. So this is our standard. If a patient comes in with autoimmune disease, this is their reset. Cancer, this is their reset. And we have over $20 million worth of research behind this program. So it's really quite amazing what you can accomplish. And by the way, you lose weight, right? So, and then intermittent fasting. Intermittent fasting is kind of my favorite because it's so easy to do. Easy is good. So what is that?
Yeah, so it looks a little bit different for a lot of people, but I know for you, Doc, a lot of times you'll just skip one meal of the day, and you'll do that a couple of times a week, and that does definitely bring about changes in blood sugar and body composition.
It's kind of a reset, just a cleanup, small cleanup. Your liver loves it. Your mitochondria, the fuel house of your cell, just starts working better again. And it also creates something that we like to call metabolic flexibility, where you can run on different kinds of fuels. Right? When you think about it, we're always running on the same fuel, 3 days or 3 meals, and the body gets lazy. And just like exercise, you want to switch it up a little bit. Yeah. So some people, go ahead.
I think I would just add in there too with some of those things. We still have our boot camp program, which Doc has been around for many, many years and been really tried and true for that changes in blood sugar and weight loss. And then we also have our Nourish plan, which is a little more of a weight in the shallow end version of that boot camp. And so it really gives us an opportunity to be able to tailor individually what is going to work best for you.
This is precision medicine, individual medicine, because everyone's unique. right? And that's why some of the studies that I had to go through with with this whole obesity seminar, I had to take it with a grain of salt because it's a study across many different people, right, who all have different needs. So the results you're going to get are going to be somewhat mixed. And as a physician, we actually have a leg up because we can individualize. Beautiful, thanks. So you need to be plant-based, right? You got that. I want the majority of each of your meals to be vegetable, especially breakfast. Compare, just say, oh, this is organic gluten-free Cheerios, Doc, and you know, the dusty stuff goes in a bowl, and you add some milk to it. I mean, the stuff is just awful. Honestly, you'd be better off nutritionally eating the box than the Cheerios. Yeah? And I'm kind of serious about that, because that experiment actually was done on rats, and the rat ones, they did way better on the box than, yeah. So fiber, fiber, fiber. Drink your water. It's really interesting. Some studies have shown that if you drink 1 or 2 glasses of cold water, your body has to heat that back up, and it burns calories like mad doing it. Free, no exercise. Yeah? So also, if you have some water before you eat, your satiety or feeling full is going to come so much quicker. You don't even have to diet. Just have a couple of glasses of water before you eat, and all of a sudden, you'll be eating less. So make sure you eat anti-inflammatory foods, right? When we have a weight issue, you are inflamed. You don't even have to measure it. It's kind of fun to measure it, but you don't have to. And the anti-inflammatory foods are whole plants, right? It's the anti-inflammatory food plan, as we call it here. And it's, generally dairy raises insulin and sugar levels dramatically. Did you know that dairy is the 2nd leading cause of diabetes today? Mm-hmm. Yep, 2nd leading cause. So new research out of my home country, the Netherlands. So dairy products should be avoided. There's a lot of reactivity to gluten lately as well. That's a multi-reasons for that. Generally, when a patient goes off of gluten, even if they're a non-reactor, you can expect your homocysteine and your C-reactive protein, this inflammatory marker, to drop by 30%. I see it across the board. If you are a reactor, in other words, there's something going on with it, it's much greater than that even. So going gluten-free is a good thing, but wow, there's a lot of junk gluten-free foods out there. It's just phenomenal. It's expensive, doesn't even taste that good. So if you do it, make sure you talk to one of our health coaches. We've got 30 years of experience that we can just download on you in half an hour, and then you'll know how to do it well and inexpensively. Islands of Peace, one of my favorite ones. Those of you that know me, I say this all the time, ad nauseum, but I come from a country that is considered one of the happiest countries in the world, and Denmark and Norway. And when you really study their culture and compare it to ours, there's a few differences. It's easier to get around. The roads are better, but that's not what I'm talking about. It doesn't take much about the roads, does it? What they have done is they have a rhythm of life that you do not break. Everybody, folks, we have breakfast at 7:30. We have tea time at 10 o'clock. We have an hour and a half to 2 hour lunch, everybody. Yeah, as a kid, even I would bicycle home for school for lunch, then play, and then I'd go back. And they also feel that if you are working through lunch, that's just culturally, you can't do that. People will really look down on you for that. So, islands of peace everywhere. I noticed the parks over there are always teeming with people just walking. And we've got these gorgeous parks here. They are really gorgeous. They are a lot nicer than over there. And I'm usually the only one walking through it. So creating islands of peace brings down your cortisol, revs up metabolism, decreases inflammation. U of M did a study last year on what are the most effective ways to get rid of stress. And they studied yoga, they studied meditation, they did all these different things, breathing techniques, and they all worked. But you know what worked the best? A 20-minute walk through the woods. So simple. Yeah? So a rhythm of life is really important. I remember the wake-up call when we first moved over here, and I had to run to Meijer because Meier's open at 10. Wow. So, yep, you go over there. And I was out there running for some putty or poster board or something for one of my kids' projects. Should have done it the day before, obviously. And I was amazed with all the little kids running around everywhere. I said, what's going on here? They should be in bed, right? I know I sound really old-fashioned here. I know I do. But there's something to be said about rhythm of life. It creates happiness. It really does. And it's good for weight loss. Other tools to use. So we have a Facebook group. And there's a lot of chatter back and forth. I think Jamie does a lot of that work, right? And does a phenomenal job. And so it's really a support group. And within the Facebook community, there's communities. And I love it that we can create a community. And also Instagram, drdenboer.com, denboer.com, Instagram at drdenboer. I do 3 60-minute videos every week. Yes, I will be covering weight loss a lot the next month or so. But it's all the latest in science, and I try to really have a positive impact within social media that way instead of all the anger that's out there. So another tool to use is our health coaches. And exercise. Blake, come over here.
Should I run?
Yes, there you go. You look good, you look good. So downstairs we have created DBC Fit, right?
Yes.
It's been a blast, right? And Blake is I don't think Blake has any bad days. And I love that about him because he's really good at motivating my patients with his enthusiasm because you love exercise, right?
True.
It's just the way it is. And what we do is exercise is a part of weight loss, not so much only because it burns calories, okay, but it makes you healthier, less inflamed, brighter, and much more motivated, right? If I stop exercising, everything goes, just everything. And my desk is messier, your eating is messier, everything just goes. So exercise, I think, is an absolutely critical component of weight loss, even though it by itself doesn't produce that much weight loss. Is that fair enough?
Yeah, I mean, and I think about the other things that you mentioned about decreasing stress.
Mm-hmm.
Exercise is one of the best ways to decrease stress. And the
Yep.
other thing that you mentioned about insulin resistance, there's
Mm-hmm.
no better way to decrease your insulin resistance than exercise.
Yep.
And so that fuels
Yeah.
all those other pathways that we're
Absolutely.
talking about, so.
Now the trouble is when you are obese, there's a bit of a challenge out there to
Definitely.
exercise, right? And that's where you jump in and customize and make sure that they do what they can do
That's
in a
right.
safe way and in a building way.
And that's the biggest thing is learning how to modify exercises. How can we accomplish some of these multi-joint movements, but in a safer, effective way for a certain individual?
Right. And then we like to call this a functional medicine or functional exercise. Okay, how would you differentiate what we teach versus what's standard out there?
Yeah, that's a great question, and I get that one quite a bit too. And the biggest thing about functional exercise is you're trying to cover a multitude of areas. So with, you think traditional strength training, you're thinking just strength. Well, with the functional training that we do downstairs, we're trying to cover strength, cardio, flexibility, and another really big one is balance and coordination. 2 things that often kind of get overlooked. So what are some movements we can do to expand our balance and coordination? That's the thing that gets totally missed in a lot of exercise programs, something that I really specialize in and try to work in.
Yeah.
So it's an all-encompassing exercise routine to cover all these different avenues.
Right. And there's really 2 types of people that we see down there, isn't there? One that like to just work out with you, and
Yeah.
you reinvent something every time, and they do it once, twice, or more per week.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's others that just go down and says, I just really need a set of exercises, right, and that I can do at home.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I
Yeah.
definitely specialize in making home programs for people, and that's the biggest thing is you got to get started. If you're not doing something, you got to get started. I mean, by show of hands here, how many of you would say you put in at least 150 minutes of moderate exercise a week? Oh, okay. Well, that's more than I thought, I guess.
This is my folks.
Yeah. So that's kind of like the minimum recommendation by a lot of these American Heart Association, a lot of these organizations like that. So helping people to get started and cover all these different avenues. That's what I try to specialize in and teach people the right movement so you're exercising safely and effectively. You want to maximize your time.
Yay. Awesome.
Yeah.
Thanks for that.
Yeah.
And one more note on the exercise is a 10-minute walk after a meal decreases sugar fluctuations by 50% for 5 hours. 10-minute walk. And if all you do for exercise is rain or shine, be out there for 10 minutes, because there's always an excuse not to, isn't there? Especially in Michigan. 10 minutes after a walk, after your meal, breakfast, lunch, dinner. Even if your whole exercise program fell apart for whatever reason, you still got 30 minutes in, along with better sugar regulation, which decreases, again, the belly fat. There's some well-researched nutraceuticals out there as well that have a proven track record. Published clinical trials is what I demand, because there's a lot of hearsay. The quality control has to be triple checked by different companies at time of harvest in the barrel and at time of expiration. Not at the time of manufacture, but expiration. And it's got to be done on multiple levels. So this is what we use in DBC and Nature's Remedies. One of my very favorite ones is endorphin. Why? It's a plant-based fiber that has profound effect on that short-chain fatty acid. When I do a stool analysis and I see that one being low, after only 4 weeks, we triple or quadruple short-chain fatty acid production. It is very noticeable. It's my sleeping giant. I really like curcumin in combination of fenugreek and collagen in order to rebuild joints that have suffered with obesity, to rebalance sugar levels, that's fenugreek, and the curcumin to lower inflammation in a tea that's called Golden Fusion. It's very yummy. I have this most evenings, and it cools things down very quickly. There's only one probiotic known that has clinical trials on it, not one trial, but trials, that shows weight loss, and that's called Ultraflora Control. When taken with no lifestyle changes, it'll give you about 10 to 12 pounds lost in a year. So if you need an extra little rocket booster, that's one of them. To fight inflammation, Ultra Inflamex 360. This one here fights insulin resistance, the belly fat, while having all the components in it to decrease inflammation in the gut especially. I also use it for Crohn's ulcerative colitis with pretty astonishing results. And it tastes pretty good. But don't believe me, because my taste buds are weird. Speaking of taste buds, how can you eat all those vegetables? On and on. And I get the question so often, says, Doc, how can you eat that way? And for me, it's more like, I know, how can you eat that way? Because what I eat is absolutely delicious, right? You can catch me eating a sweet potato with a little bit of avocado oil on it maybe, and some cinnamon. And wow, I'm just feasting away. To me, that is truly a treat. And that's because the palate has been developed that way, right? That's what we accomplish in boot camp. You get rid of some of these addictions, and the junk food will really, really start tasting like junk. I had a sip of Coca-Cola the other day. I was just kind of curious. I'm going, oh, that is just awful. Yeah? And lots of people are addicted to it. Truly addicted. So, MitoBoost. This comes from University of Berkeley. They found that mitochondrial dysfunction is a very key problem with obesity. Hence the slowing of metabolism, the slowing of the ability to think, the slowing of ability to make muscle, and actually just regenerate. And it's a mitochondrial boosting product that on our in-body scan, where we check mitochondrial function with something called phase angle, everybody goes up with it very dramatically, and they say, no more brain fog, better energy, sleep better, wound healing and recovery from exercise is a lot faster. I love that one. It was actually clinically trialed on AIDS patients as well. In 3 months' time, more than 80% of them went into full remission. Yeah, without any medication. Been published. Metaguest. If you are over 50, this one is for you. Stomach acids decline precipitously after 50. At age 50, you have half the stomach acids compared to when you're 20. Okay? So that's a problem. And for some people, it's a lot earlier. So heartburn is one of the signs and symptoms of it. Bloating, rumbling stomach, just not breaking down your food. And when that's happening, you're getting a lot of malabsorption, and it adds to the obesity. Those people that have hypochlorhydria or low stomach acids and take this can expect an average of 8 to 12 pounds lost in a year. Better energy, better digestion. Very simple. You can accomplish the same thing with apple cider vinegar. Yeah? So 1 to 2 tablespoons before a meal. I've tried it. It's one I can't handle for some reason, taste. But I've tried it, and it does seem to work really well. Yeah. If you do it, it'd be Bragg's apple cider vinegar. And berberine. So this one came a little bit as a surprise to me, because we've used berberine here in this office for a long time to rebalance the gut bacteria. But I just did it for that, and I wasn't thinking about weight when I was thinking about it. But what the beautiful thing in functional medicine is, if you do one thing, you'll have benefit in other places. And there's actually still a lot of research on berberine and how it helps with weight loss, because it balances sugar levels, rebalances the good bugs, so you get more short-chain fatty acids, and it's a powerhouse. So it's derived from barberry. You can actually buy that. You can buy them dried, and so if you want to use the berry itself, just cut it up into pieces, throw it over your oatmeal or whatever you're having. And if you're having oatmeal, please let it be steel cut. The glycemic index is a lot lower. And prepare it in an Instapot or soak it overnight. That way you don't have to sit there and stir it for an hour. So these are some of the things that we use as tools in this office as well. But again, the primary thing is food, food, food. And when I talk about food, because I get this question a lot too, said, Doc, I like to make a smoothie in the morning. Is that good? I said, yeah, it's a lot of good ways to get a lot of phytonutrients very quickly into your body. However, you have now broken down the cell walls, you've pulverized it, which makes those calories much more accessible, and you will absorb all those calories. Versus if you were to chew that spinach and whatever else, you're not going to absorb all those calories, right? Because the body can't quite access to it. Think about it as a nut butter spread. Okay, it's been pulverized. You are going to absorb all that fat, all of that energy, all of it. And I like nut butters, don't get me wrong. But when I eat cashews or walnuts, just little pieces, right, that go in there. It's not pulverized. And a lot of that is actually going to end up in the toilet again. Same satiety, less calorie absorption. So think of food that way as well. So I'm not absolutely fanatic. I think an occasional smoothie is good, but if you do it every morning, you might want to rethink that. Keep food whole, keep the cell walls intact, make it mostly plants with nuts, seeds, some berries, some fruit, right? And we're going to have a good time changing lives just with that. So that is the very simple conclusion I came to. I, again, went through a journey of all these biochemical reactions and the complexity of this and that, and it still boils down to eat real food. And a lot of things will correct themselves. So simple. Be happy, smile a lot, yeah, have a good rhythm in life, be grateful, and things start falling into place. Avoid obvious toxins. That's a big one in today's society. So, okay. So we're switching it up a little bit this year on how we're doing these seminars. So every month, we're going to have the interview. Okay? So I'm going to be interviewing somebody that's very interesting. It could be a DBC doctor, some of the staff, a health expert. It's going to be a 20-minute interview in a sit-down studio kind of a conversation. And we're going to be putting that on YouTube and be very informative, hopefully somewhat entertaining, and a different topic every time. So we're doing that instead of this format, but I don't want to let go of this format either. I kind of love this format. So every quarter, there's going to be a seminar done by me on some topic. Watch Facebook, watch the announcements on the board. It'll be spread all over. So we're going to continue these what were monthly seminars 30 years later, we're going to be doing them quarterly. Okay, changing with the times. That's really what we're doing. Yeah, I should tell you about my very first one I did. So this is over 30 years ago, and I was so nervous. I was so nervous, just out of graduate school, and oh man, can I talk to these people? And I, on purpose, kept the crowd very small, 7 people. I remember it well. Yeah, building over there. And I had the on a tripod, right, the big sheets of paper that you just went down, and that's how I presented it. And it actually went off quite well. Had a lot of questions at the end, and that was the very start of these seminars. Yeah, never look back. Good. So, questions? Yes.
Timing of drinking water, is there any issues, digestion, all that stuff?
Yeah. So there was a study done on that, on how much is too much. And once you go beyond 2 cups, it starts really affecting the stomach acids as well as digestive enzymes. So you're allowed 2 glasses of water before the meal. You can sip on some water during the meal also, but once you get into the 3 territory too much, you're starting to get into issues. Yeah. And speaking of water, we always wake up dehydrated, so it's important to slam 2 nice glasses of water down every time you wake up. It should be just standard protocol. Yeah? Water is one of the top deficiencies. I used to call water the #1 deficiency. I've changed my mind. Fiber is. Yeah. Yes?
With the nutraceuticals, would you recommend any of those for normal weight people or just for overweight people?
No. I think normal weight also can benefit because these are all health producing. This topic was about weight loss, right? And people who are overweight just want to see those numbers go. And I get that. I just want to see the numbers go. But, and then I'm trying to sneak in, no, this is healthy for you, this or that, numbers. But these all have profound benefits. Like the endorphin, I have that every day. If you take care of your intestinal health, you're taking care of everything. The berberine, I'm taking that every day. If I can do a better job regulating my sugar levels and get rid of bad bugs, perfect, right? The curcumin, I'm having that every day. Lower inflammation, and that is the #1 cause of cardiovascular disease, Alzheimer's, autoimmune disease. Why not keep it lower? So just little add-ons. It allows me to do things like have really long hours when I want to without as much damage. You know, for instance. Yeah, trying to make up for it. Yes.
When you talk about a glass of water, how many ounces are you talking?
8 ounces.
8 ounces?
8 ounces.
And how many ounces should you have a day?
Okay, so it's the minimum. So if you're not sweating with exercise, so the minimum is half of your body weight in ounces. So if you're 100 pounds, it'd be 50 ounces. If you're 200, right, it's 100 ounces a day. So that's the minimum. Yeah. And no, coffee does not count. Yes. So this is where we really get into individualization, okay? Vegetables, I can throw at anybody with anything, right? There's really no negatives. But with fruits, we are a little bit more specific. So if we're into a pre-diabetes kind of mode, or we definitely have insulin resistance, then we get pretty picky with fruit because it is sugar. And it's sugar combined with fiber, so yay. But then we start picking out the low glycemic index kind of fruits, which would be apple, okay? Blueberries, blackberries, things like that. And then that's when we really start preaching. You really avoid the tropical fruits because they're really sugar bombs. Yeah, there's some benefits to them, like they have good flavones in there, and flavones really have a lot. It's a good antioxidant. But if you have sugar issues, maybe stay away from those or really minimize it. Does that kind of make sense? So, but the one thing I want you to get out of this gathering also is yeah, I like the rhythm, but when it comes to food, I do want diversity and not too much of rhythm there. So a broad diversity of different foods is pretty critical, because if you put in radioisotope, you tag blueberries and watch where it goes in the body, most of it actually goes to the brain and benefits brain health. It helps fix things in the brain. It's an antioxidant for the brain. It's very neuroprotective. Do the same thing with blackberries, and most of it actually goes to the descending colon. So it's very anti-cancerous in the colon, right? And it has most of its benefits there. So just that little illustration tells you we got to eat a variety of things because they all have different benefits. And they're all good. Okay. Yes?
What about eating before exercise?
Okay. So exercise timing-wise, there's so much to cover here. So the biggest benefit, first of all, was to exercise first thing in the morning before breakfast. Exercise is good anytime, right? Exercise is good. I'm just telling you when it's best. So before breakfast. However, the study showed that a little bit of carbohydrate to get the body up and running, to get the liver up and running, to produce the fuel for exercise was pretty critical. So I like to exercise before breakfast. What I do is I grab those blueberries I was talking about, just a few handfuls of blueberries, my water, boom, off I am. And then I make sure that the meal after that is not too close to it, because if you do, say, a pretty intensive, let's say interval training, the stress of interval training, because it is a stress, just created leakiness of the gut, leaky gut syndrome. Everybody has that, because leakiness of the gut is variable, and you will have indigestion because of it. That's why, for example, if somebody completes a marathon, there's no way they're going to sit down and eat a meal. I mean, it's just not going to happen, right? You know you'll get into trouble with that. You just intuitively know that. It's the same thing with exercise. You got to wait a bit. Yeah. Yes?
Why does your balance decrease as you age?
Well, why am I skiing slower right now than I used to? I was actually reflecting about that this winter, where I love skiing. It's one of the hobbies I haven't. Okay, and I remember being at one of the ski resorts. I had a radar gun, and I tripped it at 68 miles an hour, right, in full tuck. This was when I was in my early 20s. I was thinking, I wouldn't even dream of doing that today. I wouldn't dream of doing it today. Why? Is it because I'm not capable? No. At least I think not. I have fallen a few times. I've dislocated this shoulder twice. Right? I mean, I can go on and on about that. And I prefer not to have that pain. So there's that mental thing. And it's the same thing that prevents us from doing things that encourages balance. Walking with my kids, this is a long time ago, and we have a long driveway, and there's this fence, and they were all just walking along it. I said, sure. I used to do that all the time when I worked on the farm. Did it, and I'm going, what on earth? Am I getting old or something? And then I was thinking about it, when's the last time I walked along a fence? It's been a long time, so I started practicing it, and within a week it was back. So in the Netherlands, what they've recognized that it's more disuse than age and psychological mental blocks. And so it becomes they have gyms about the size of this, and they have broken stairs, and they have potholes in roads, and they have all kinds of obstacles that they make the elderly walk. It's just part of what they do over there. And I must say, the Dutch elderly people, like my uncle that just passed at 95, he was bicycling everywhere yet at 93. I remember it well. That's normal. He had good balance. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yes.
Anything to the combination of, say, fiber and fats and protein and all that in a meal?
Yeah. So fiber blunts the glycemic index dramatically. It does help digestion. It increases bulk, so you get satiety faster. So you will eat less significantly while feeling like you've had a really great meal. And so all the studies were done on individual ingredients, because that's how studies work, right? But really, when you mix it together, that's when magic happens. And it's absolutely amazing. For example, one of our products, curcumin, the anti-inflammatory, has 3% of rosemary in it and a tiny, tiny bit of hops. So just a tiny bit. It increases absorption of curcumin 45-fold. So obviously magic happens when you mix things. Yeah, and they're huge into research in that in Europe, where if you take this nutrient, what if we added just a touch of that, and then boop. Yeah, it's pretty cool. Yeah, good. Last question.
For sugar control, is soluble or non-soluble more important?
For sugar control, as far as fiber goes, soluble. Yeah, totally soluble. Yep. Mm-hmm. Yeah. All right. thanks for being here. Awesome to have you. Yes, thank you. And good.